The decision to bring Nobara back within the final 5 chapters is an incredibly ballsy decision made by JJK that has left the fan base somewhat divided by the choice, so let's talk about it.
Sometimes you gotta close the door to open a window.
Chapter 267 brings us only 4 chapters left within Jujutsu Kaisen's story, and 267 serves to tie up a fair amount of points involving Yuta, Yuji, and even Nobara. And regardless of how you feel about it, they are extremely consistent throughout the entire series, and it ties up a lot of stuff here that's very, very consistent. It's something I really enjoy. But we're treated to a flashback of Yuta and Gojo during their switch training, with Yuta in Gojo's body and Gojo in Yuta's body, and this is made very, very apparent by their expressions. There are differences in their behavior and the mannerisms. For example, Gojo would have never been seen with this level of anxiety on his face, a level of anxiety that is synonymous with Yuta. And on the flip side, we have the nonchalance of Gojo within Yuta's body. It's very indicative of Gojo here, but their conversation is what's the most interesting part here. They're talking about Sukuna's final finger and how Yuta wishes to use it in order to copy Shrine's technique, even mentioning how during the body swap he can't axe Gojo's memories here, which is sort of pieces of information like this that JJK likes to lean on here, and it's the consistency that I was talking about at the beginning of the video. I mentioned a while back how Yuta should have had memories from Gojo due to their body swap training, but now he confirms here that that's not the case, and instead Yuta gaining memories from Gojo is actually just really a side effect of Kenjaku's chaos technique here. But Gojo refuses to let Yuta use the final finger, mentioning how while it does fulfill the conditions for Yuta's chaos technique, the finger alone wouldn't be enough for him to analyze the technique as a whole, which Yuta agrees with, mentioning how if Inumaki hadn't have helped him with chaos speech, there's tons we wouldn't have known. And we're shown a flashback with Yuta talking to Inumaki, being shocked about how it works through a phone, which we saw Inumaki use way back when in the Goodwill arc against Miwa. And I'd also be willing to bet that this information here is what gave Yuta that idea for the tape recorder, and that's where the conversation was about within chapter 222, and about him putting Inumaki to work, about him getting information about chaos speech, and then using the tape recorder to help him fight Sukuna. But Gojo continues to say how he doesn't think it's a good idea to lose their connection to Sukuna, and he frames it how Hikari would have said it also. It's the fever. And I think personally, this sentiment right here is Gojo willing to take a bit of a gamble on his students coming through, and coming through in a big way, because they did, and he's right, they did. But as JJK mentioned in chapter 272, a Jujutsu sorcerer is nothing but a con artist, and this sentence from Reggie right here really is hammered home within this chapter, in my opinion. I mean, throughout the Shinjuku Showdown, it's very much hammered home, but definitely more so within this chapter, and also the chapter where the Jacob's Ladder was hit by Angel against Sukuna here. But we're given a lot more information about Yuta's copy technique and how it works, the conditions needed to fulfill it, and how Yuta has been using it this entire time. And in order for Yuta to use copy, he needs Rika to ingest a piece of the target's body. The part required and the amount depends on the technique that he's trying to copy, and also how many times he can use it, meaning Yuta has limits to how much he can use a copy technique, which is why in his domain it allows him to use copy techniques an unlimited amount of times, but it's randomized depending on what sword he picks up. But Yuta states that the stronger the chaos technique, the more fatal the body part is needed to be ingested, and Yuta explains how even if he can't meet these conditions, he can use a Banner Vow to limit the uses in exchange for fulfilling the conditions within the technique, which is nice to see someone on our side starting to use Binder Vows, and I think it's kind of nice that we've seen it from Todo and from Yuta now. But these points are all extremely consistent with what we've seen so far throughout the story, especially with how Kenjaku's technique failed him. Yuta has Rika consume Kenjaku's body, and this is obviously a fatal thing. This is probably the point of no return for Kenjaku, which is definitely a point I am very sad about within this story as a whole, but it is what it is. But, however, considering the strength of Kenjaku's technique and how Kenjaku never actually explained to Yuta how it works, Yuta's usage of the technique was ultimately flawed, because remember, Kenjaku explained his technique to Gojo back in Shibuya, but that was it. I think Kenjaku should or needed to have explained it to Yuta, which is why Yuta got so excited when Uro explained her technique to him, because he thought to himself, damn, she's giving me the inside scoop on how this fucking works. If I can get a body part, that's GG's. I'm stealing your technique. But But Yuji also mentions, what if the target can use reverse curse technique? Couldn't Yuta just have Rika eat Gojo and Hikari's arm, and then they heal their arms, and that way Yuta could have copied their techniques? And this part, to me, is genuinely the funniest, because it feels as if Gege has saw what the community has said, because anytime there's a conversation about Yuta, it's just like, well, why doesn't he just copy Gojo's technique or his technique, and then he's just ultimately powerful? But it feels like Gege has seen that and put a stop to it, because Yuji, he's really out here just trying to build the ultimate fucking sorcerer right now, and honestly, I don't blame him, but Yuta explains this is just simply a no-go, because if the target heals their ingested body parts, then the conditions for Yuta's curse technique are no longer being fulfilled. This part of the chapter here, Gege clears up why Inumaki and Angel haven't been able to heal their arms or have their arms healed or restored with either RCT or modern science. Now, this part is consistent with the overall story and how RCT works, because obviously for a long time now we've had RCT within the story, but it's been a case of like, how the fuck does it work? And even Yuta's battle in Sentai Colony, it's all consistent. But when Uro loses her arm, Yuta has Rika eat that body part. Now, Ryu makes a comment of how thorough Yuta is, going on to further say how regenerating a missing limb is no easy feat. Now, this is consistent because when we really think about it with the overall story, the moments where folks have used RCT, people like Gojo, Sukuna, Hikari, and even Higuruma, these are all people that we've seen regenerate missing limbs here. Now, there's probably a few people in there that I'm missing. I'm pretty sure Hazanoki did it also. I'm pretty sure that's part of his overall technique, but those are always small body parts that he is missing. Teeth, eyeballs, stuff like that. Now, Gojo and Sukuna, for obvious reasons, can heal body parts and limbs, obviously. Hikari, who's a domain, allows for even faster healing than both Gojo and Sukuna, as stated by Uraumi, and now Higuruma, who was a talent who could have eventually rivaled Gojo, heals his arm, but he doesn't quite heal it properly, but it's there. Now, even Yuta himself has only ever regenerated his hand. I mean, he couldn't regenerate himself when he got split in half by Sukuna. We've only ever seen him regenerate a hand, and you could use Yuji as an example right here when he lost his leg in Sukuna's domain, but Yuji reconnected that leg via blood manipulation, because you can see that the blood is never really disconnected, so Yuji just uses his blood and pulls that leg back in, and that is similar to what Shoso did against Kenjaku in their fight. But in most of the cases within the series, the target regrows a limb that's been destroyed but is still attached to the body. For example, Kenjaku when he had his arms broken against Yuki, and also Yuki when she got hit by gravity against Kenjaku. It hammers home the consistency here, and that is something that I really enjoy. But what I will say is that I wish this kind of consistency came a lot earlier within the series. It would have left a lot less confusion and contention around how RCT works, because for the most part, for a lot of fights within Jujutsu Kaisen, most people will always be like, okay, has said Yuta got RCT? And if he has, it's GG's for his opponent if they haven't. Now, moving back into the story, Yuta explains how that's why he has used Inumaki and Angel's arms in order to copy their techniques. Now, fully enough, those two techniques that he's copied there end up being pivotal in dealing damage against Sukuna. We get that one panel of Hikari also, by the way, convincing Charles to give up a rib to Rika, a rib bone to Rika, which will definitely be healed back. Yeah, that motherfucker is not getting that rib back, let me tell you. But Yuta suggests that using Yuji's finger as a basis for him stealing Sukuna's curse technique, or copying it, should I say, which at this point in the timeline, Sukuna's technique was engraved onto the body of Yuji. However, Yuji hadn't awakened his version of that technique yet. Now, obviously, we know curse techniques differ from person to person, but there's overall a branch, basically. Now, Yuji's awakening is what caused his shrine to be different to Sukuna, and this clarifies why the cleave that Yuta used on Sukuna wasn't crazy strong and was just more like cat scratches, because it was only a finger that they used to copy the technique, and it wasn't fatal to Yuji. But this plan served as a bluff against Sukuna, which again goes back to the thing that Reggie said, a sorcerer is nothing but a con artist. And honestly, I'm starting to think that this whole motto of not a con artist here, of a sorcerer being a con artist, is Gege's entire motto. I'm feeling a bit conned by Gege. This dude is just hitting us with misdirects left, right, and center. But this plan was kept as secret as possible from Yuji in case of the soul resonance that was mentioned between Todo and Mai, basically leaking information from Yuji to Sukuna. Now, how that could happen, I'm not sure, because Yuta mentions how he's pretty certain that Yuji can't read Sukuna's mind and Sukuna can't do that backwards. So they're just being extra precautious here. But we cut back over to the real-time event where Sukuna recognizes that Yuji is missing two fingers rather than one, realizing Yuta has bluffed him inside his domain, mentioning how his final finger wasn't used, but instead it is now still out there, and Sukuna realizes this. Now, this is where we arrive at the pivotal moment in this chapter, the Nobara return. Now, after letting the chapter settle for a bit, I can honestly say I'm genuinely conflicted about this event. I'm actually conflicted. At first, I was really, really hyped, and I still am. I'm still really hyped, and I'm conflicted because, on one hand, I'm hyped, and also, it was somewhat obvious that it was going to happen. Gege left this door open for his possible return, and I've always said, I don't really care whether she comes back. I would just like to know the whereabouts of her death. I would just like to have that confirmed for us. But Gege left this door open for us for all the way back in Shibuya. And I also feel like bringing her back in the final 5 chapters, I think that was possibly the wrong time to do it, I'm not going to lie. In my opinion, I believe having her shown to us when Todo arrived on the battlefield with Yuji, I think that would have been the opportune moment right there. We could have done it in a way that had Todo arrive to the battlefield alongside Yuji and joining Yuji and ready to fight Sukuna, but also at the same time show Nobara waking up but keeping that unbeknownst to Yuji, so that we, the audience, we know and we could have waited in anticipation of what was to come next, which would she have joined the battlefield or with Sukuna, or would she have continued to go on and do what she did in this chapter, obviously just later on the line. But let me know what your thoughts are in the comments down below. Obviously, I know the fanbase is very, very divided on this Nobara Eternal situation. I am obviously conflicted, and I think I will have my final thoughts on this return when the series concludes. But we are also shown Gaku Ganji and Utahime here talking about how Nobara had just only woken up no longer than half an hour ago and wondering if she'll be able to do what she needs to do. Now this one, I'm going to be honest with you, where Gaku Ganji and Utahime just sort of standing there around the finger, just keeping guard, just in case. Like, that one really was a gamble here, and I do think that is what Gojo was sort of referring to there when he said, you know, it's the fever. Yeah, I'm not sure how, like, I'm hoping Gege kind of returns to this at some point here, because maybe in the next chapter we'll get to know what was going on with Nobara here. But Nobara, she does what she's needed to do, and that is to hit Sukuna's final finger with a resonance attack, and this sends Sukuna into fucking panic mode, recognizing that this situation is bad. He can't open his domain, he can't maintain his hollow wicker basket, and at this rate, Yuji's domain sure hit will fucking connect with him. But Gege does something really fucking beautiful here, and we are shown this panel of Yuji and Nobara, which Nobara makes a direct reference to Gojo bringing back Yuji after everyone thought he was dead. And honestly, I really fuck with that. I fuck with that callback. I'm a sucker for authors tying it all back to one certain event. I don't know what you call that kind of storytelling method, but I fuck with it. That nice roundabout way, I fuck with it. Again, Jujutsu Kaisen is a cycle. It's quite funny. But back to reality here. Yuji's sure hit in his domain connects. A soul dismantle lands on Sukuna. And a nice little detail that I did notice here was that his domain's soul dismantle here, it shows the scissors as white, whereas when he's not in his domain, it shows the scissors depicted as black, which I think is quite interesting. But from this point on, Yuji continues to beat the ever-loving snot out of Sukuna, making him throw up a bunch of fingers. And in this panel, now I could be wrong here, but it almost looks as if there was 5 fingers of Sukuna's that have been thrown up here, just hiding in the background there. I saw people point out 4, but it does look like there was a 5th hanging in the balance at the background there. But Sukuna makes no effort to save those fingers like he did last time, and instead choosing to counterattack Yuji. Now, he tells Yuji how this isn't over, mentioning how he can't be flayed with this domain, noting how Yuji hasn't been healing, he has surpassed his limits long ago, and on top of this, the vast amount of cursed energy he has used for this domain. He mentions how Yuji is the one who is on the ropes here. Now, with them two continuing to trade blows, the one thing I like here is how Sukuna gets so reckless. He could have easily have grabbed those fingers and ate them again, but instead he chose to attack, and I think that is par for the course with Sukuna. Rather than going the route of cowardice like Mahito did, Sukuna chose recklessness, and in these finals moments, it's all or nothing for him right here, and it kind of reminds me of that Heian era, that primal sorcerer mindset. That's exactly what Kashimo could have done. He says this against Hakari, like, I could sit here and wait, but I'd rather attack because that's how fucking losers think. And I like that mentality here. Again, it's consistent across the board. It's all or fucking nothing here. Speaking of Mahito, Yuji continues to land blows against Sukuna, but something Yuji hasn't done at all during this fight, during the Shinjuku showdown, and I think a lot of us, including myself, have forgotten about, was Divergent Fist. Divergent Fist makes a return, and right on cue, Yuji lands the delayed impact on Sukuna, with Sukuna being reminded, yeah, I can still fucking do that shit, and Yuji tells Sukuna it's time we end this cycle of curses and proceeds to land the final Black Flash on Sukuna here, punching a hole in this dude's chest, and it even looks as if his back is literally blown out. Pause. But I mentioned Mahito here because this exact combo was the same combo Yuji used on Mahito at the end of Shibuya. The Diversion Fist combo into the Black Flash combo. And that ended Mahito, and it was the exact same way he ended Sukuna. And as he mentions it, it's time to end the cycle of cases. Now, there is something poetic about Yuji breaking this cycle of cases with the same attack twice. I don't know what it is. I don't know what you call that type of story writing. Again, I just think it's very poetic and it's nice. I see it. But 267 was definitely a divisive chapter. I left this review a little bit later because I've gone back, I've read the chapter a couple of times now. I've sat with my thoughts for a little bit, and I kind of want to do that regardless for all the rest of the chapters here. And I think regardless of your feelings or my feelings, I think it would be disingenuous to say that this chapter wasn't hype, because it was. However, I will say the timing on Nobara's return may seem out of place, and the more I think about it, the more I'm kind of like, not sure I fuck with that. I think I would have much rather hear just been at least shown a little bit earlier on, so we kind of like, holy fuck, she's alive, you know? Even if it was just a panel similar to what he did with Miwa way back in the Sendai colony after Yuta's fights, I think that would have been a better way. But I think regardless here, I think I am happy to see the resolution that JJK brings about for these final 5 chapters, because again, as he said in his statement, he is happy, he is satisfied with this ending. And honestly, I think that's all you can ever ask for with a mangaka, is that they go into their ending and they end it on their terms, and they end it in a way that is satisfying to them, because again, it's their story. We're just here for the ride, and we're just here to enjoy it. Anyways, that is everything from me. If you're still watching, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Be sure to go buy yourself some fucking merch. It helps the channel. Also, be sure to follow me on all my socials in the description below. And as always, I'll catch you guys all in the fucking next one. Much fucking love. Big fucking kisses. Peace.